All right, what is up, guys? We are going to be talking about how to actually print your what is it called? Linoleum block, right? So here's what I'm going to be printing, right? This is my block here. I'm going to be teaching you guys how to set up your printing station. So when you are printing, you're only going to be printing on this area on top of my supply cart. Okay, so this is the press itself, and all of the supplies for your printing right now is going to be in this drawer labeled printmaking. Okay, they're also going to find some stuff in general that you are going to use as well, like tape and scissors. Potentially, but most of your stuff is going to be in this drawer here. All right. So what you're going to find in this drawer, you have the actual ink. Go ahead and put that on top. You have a spatula, an ink spatula. There are 3 rollers here. I highly recommend this one. This one just works out a little bit better than the others. But if you really need a big one for some reason, then go ahead and grab the big one. But again, I would say this one's probably your best bet. That's why it's in red, so that way you can see it. The other ones work. It's just that this one is a little bit better. And then you're gonna have this picture frame here. Okay, the reason you have this picture frame is because there's a piece of glass on top. You're going to be using that. And then you're also going to have this whiteboard here, okay? So once you're done with this drawer, you only need one brayer. This is called a brayer. I don't know if I mentioned that. Or a roller, whichever you want to call. Go ahead and close that drawer. Okay. You're also going to find right here, I don't have it yet, but there's going to be a spray bottle that you are going to use to clean up, but we'll talk about that when we need to clean up. Okay. So the way you want to set up your printing station, right? We have our printer. On the right side, you are going to put your picture frame. Sorry, I'm working with one hand, so it's a little difficult. So you're gonna have your picture frame here, okay? Your ink here, and this ink is for the entire year, believe it or not, right? This entire thing should last the entire year. If not, we shouldn't need more than one more of these, and I'll teach you how to take the ink out so that we conserve as much ink as possible. Our spatula, we want to leave that near the ink because that's what the ink is. That's what the spatula is for. And the brayer, we're gonna put in between the whiteboard and the picture frame. Okay, so this is where you are going to place your linoleum block. So let me go ahead and get that. There you go. All right, and this is where you're going to get your ink, place your ink from the container. So basically, you're gonna open this up. I'm using one hand, so I apologize if it's looks a little uncomfortable. You're gonna see that there's this top layer, right? If you stick this whole thing in like that and go right through it, basically everything in here is gonna dry up, and then we're gonna have to throw the whole bottle away because it's gonna dry up like plastic, okay? What you're gonna do is just with the top or the very tip of the spatula, you're gonna scrape a bit off the top like that. Okay, notice that's all I took out. A little bit goes a really long way. Okay, I'm gonna put it on the top of this here picture frame, right? And that's pretty much all you want to take out at one time. All right, if you take out more, then more of it's gonna dry out. This stuff dries fairly quickly, so that's why we don't wanna put too much of it on this picture frame at one time. Remember, you can always just get more later if you need it, but for now, we're gonna close it. Remember, always remember to close it. If you leave this open and that top part hardens off and it dries, it's pretty much, 1, gonna be a huge waste of ink. I have to scrape that off, and 2, you're not gonna be able to get any more ink without jamming the spatula in, which is gonna waste even more ink. So before anything, make sure this is closed. Okay, do not forget to close this ink. Then you're going to mix this. If you notice, you'll notice there's some water that's in there. It's not actually water, it's like a binder that makes the ink like not just like pigment, like sand, right? So you're gonna use this. This is why it's called a spatula, right? Because you can scrape some up and then put it down. So you're gonna wanna make a small little like rectangle. It's no good if it's just on the spatula. So, you know, scrape it off, scoop it up, and then just flatten it out a bit. Okay, it doesn't have to be like super perfect and super flat. You just want it to be kind of velvety, okay, like a ribbon, all right? Then you're going to take your brayer, okay, and you're just gonna get a bit of it. So I'm just gonna go from the bottom here, and I'm gonna roll it out, okay? I'm basically stretching out the ink so that it's actually like just a thin layer, okay? So if you've ever seen leather, right, that's what the texture should look like. You're trying to pull it out and have it look like leather. Notice I'm not going back and forth like this. There's actually no point in doing that because it's only gonna cover like a small part of the brayer. Just pull down, lift up, pull down, lift up, or push up, lift up, push, lift, okay? And if you do that, you're gonna cover the entire brayer. Notice here, right? It's pretty covered, right? And you know it's the right thickness when you see those little like flecks, like those little holes. It looks like leather, like I mentioned, right? This area here looks like leather. So once that's good to go, we're going to look at our block, all right? So remember, we carved out some of this area, so that way this is lower than the parts that are still in pencil here, right? So you're gonna carefully and slowly keep this flat, because if it's like sideways, right, you can still accidentally get some in there. Keep it flat. Look at that, right? The areas that I carved out are not getting ink, right? Remember, like a stamp, but the areas that I didn't carve out are still picking up ink. So notice here, right, like it's starting to lose some of the ink. You just come back to your palette, right? This is your ink palette. You grab some more ink and then reapply it, like so. So sometimes you're gonna get a little bit like right there, right? Like that part I carved out, but I got a little bit of ink on that. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. And the reason we actually have it on this whiteboard is so that if we get, like if we need to roll off of it, we can get it on the whiteboard. And the whiteboard is easier to clean than my cart, okay? So make sure you get enough ink on there. You should see the color change, right? Like the difference between this section, you can see that doesn't have that much ink versus like this section, which has more ink. This section looks like it could still use a little bit more ink too, right? One way you can tell if you put enough ink is if when you hold it up in the light, you can see a gloss or a shine on it, okay? You wanna be careful not to put too much though, because it's kind of like, this is still liquid. So imagine like you take glue, right? You have glue and you smush it between two pieces of paper and some of it like squeezes out. That's what's gonna happen if you put too much ink on your block, all right? So we're almost good to go. Just a few little sections left. Need some ink. If you need to, you can also pick it up, but I would recommend not doing that just because it's gonna make your hands really dirty. And on this stage, you don't want to have dirty hands because when you print, you don't want your paper to get dirty, right? Okay, so I think that's good enough, right? I'm gonna set my roller or my brayer down right here. That way it's not in the way of anything, okay? Make sure at this point in time, I mentioned this earlier, right? The reason you tear your paper before you get to the printing is because right now, this is gonna dry on top of your block and you don't want the ink to dry on top of your block, you want it to dry on your paper. So make sure you have your paper. So any paper that I would need, right, here we go. I'm just gonna show you one piece of paper right now, okay? You're going to make sure you have your paper, just leave it over to the side, make sure no ink is on it, okay? You're gonna take your block. I'm doing this with one hand, so it might be, my hands might get a little ink on it, but I'm gonna do my best. So you'll notice here on the printer, there are these pieces of tape. If there's no two pieces of tape here, you might have to like get this tape yourself and put it there. But notice here, we have these two L's, okay? You're gonna put your block right here on the inside L, okay? You're gonna line up the bottom left corner to this corner here, like so. It doesn't have to be like perfectly flat on it because like your plate is kind of round, right? But once you put the paper on, it's gonna stick to the tape, okay? Or sorry, once you have the paper on, you can push down, and so your block sticks to that tape underneath. You just want to try to line it up as close as you can to that corner, that tape right there. Okay? Now, we're going to look at this L, okay? This is where you're going to put the corner of your paper. So, I'm going to take my paper, okay? We have one part that's ripped and one part that's not ripped. I like to use the part that's not ripped because it's a little bit more straight and easy to line up. Okay, so line it up there. I'm doing this with one hand again, so it is a little bit more challenging. And once I drop it on there, I'm going to put some pressure where the ink is. So the ink is a little sticky, which is why the paper will stick to it, right? And I put a little pressure so that way the paper doesn't move when I put it through the printer, okay? Because if you don't do this step where you put where you stick the paper onto the actual block, the paper might move when you run it through the printer, okay? So now that I have my paper down on top of my block, I'm going to take the blankets, okay? Try not to move these. Always make sure that these are like going this way. Both sides are going this way. If one of them's a little bit off, shift it back and try to make it as straight as possible. Okay, you're gonna take the blankets and you're going to put the blankets on top. So that's one blanket, and there's the second blanket. All right, so make sure there's no ink on your hands, because if you get ink on this, you might get ink on everything. It's okay if these move, right? This can move back and forth. Just make sure it doesn't turn, okay? And if it does turn, just make it straight again, okay? Now, this is gonna be kind of hard to do with one hand, but basically you're gonna put your one hand here, right? So in this case, it would be my right hand. And then you see this little like lever thing right here, right? Or not lever, but whatever. You basically turn it, right? You're gonna grab this, make sure you hold down right here. Okay, I'm gonna do it without holding it down because I only have one hand, but you're gonna want one hand here. If you can, like if your hand is big enough, put your thumb on this side, and you're actually gonna help push this like metal plate through, okay? So since I only have one hand, I'm not gonna hold it down here, so it may come out a little strange, but I can at least turn this. So it's gonna need a little bit of help to get through, right? You'll notice that like it doesn't always, like let's say, look, I'm turning it, right? But it's not moving, right? You might need to give it a little bit of help. So, oh my God. All right, maybe I can use my belly here to push it in. Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna turn it while pushing it with my belly. Hopefully you have both hands for this so that you have more control. Oh, see that? So that's why we actually want to put our hand here, so that you saw the blanket move, right? We don't want anything to move. If we put a little bit of pressure here, then that won't happen. Just make sure, obviously, don't like, this can happen. Don't leave your fingers here underneath this roller, right? Because this will smash your finger and it will hurt. So just keep backing out of it like that as your fingers get closer to the roller, okay? So I'm actually gonna put the phone down, but basically, again, what you're gonna do is hold down, right? If you can, push it forward, but if not, that's okay, just hold down, and then use this little handle and turn it to move the press that way. So I'm gonna pause it, and then I'm gonna show you on the other side. All right, once you've got it through to the other side, all right, you're gonna have to lift the blankets up, and as you lift it up, just go ahead and throw it over the top here, okay? And it should stay. Take your paper, carefully lift up your paper, pull it out, okay? You can set your paper right here next to the print, and there you go, right? Before you drop this blanket, make sure you take your block off because there's still a little bit of ink. It's just a little bit of ink, right? We don't want that on the blanket because that's gonna get your paper dirty. And that's it. You have your block, and then the image is transferred over to your paper. Now this, if you notice here, right, I can see, right, this area needed more ink. Any part that has that white like blotchiness, you can do it again, except you know next time you need more ink. That's all it is, right? Like if you see this area here, it's this very solid black, so you know that that came out okay. But the areas that are blotchy, just make sure the next time you run your roller over it, right, you check it again to see if there are any like areas that need a little bit more help. And that's it. That's how you print. You may need a few practice tries before you get it right, and that's perfectly normal, right? But once you get it, it'll become much more automatic for you. You'll know what to look for. Again, it just takes practice, and that's it. If there's anything else that you didn't understand, please, reach out to me and I will help you out.